My talk here is going to be about the arts community in Bushwick as I've seen it over the past 6 years, and some challenges that I see associated with the arts community, and some things that we've been trying to do about those challenges. So first, as Phil mentioned, I am not an artist myself, but I have been living for 7 years in one of the most hyped up-and-coming arts neighborhoods in New York right now, that is Bushwick. The New York Times says that we are the newest Bohemia and arguably the coolest place on the planet in the real estate section, which we'll get into in a second. So I'm living in this neighborhood, and I have to tell you, I love it. It's fantastic. But I'm also very, very conscious of the fact that I live in this neighborhood, and the fact that I live in this neighborhood is part of what I see as a very problematic trajectory of gentrification and displacement that's occurring in our city. As a community organizer, I and some of my colleagues have been working to find new and sustainable ways to both support and advance the arts community in the neighborhood, while also confronting the challenges that come with the presence of a visible arts community in solidarity with other residents of the neighborhood and other uses within the neighborhood. So that's getting a little ahead of myself. I wanted to give you the little personal bio background, why I'm doing this if I'm not an artist. So I first kind of got a taste of what it felt like to be part of a community in the art room at my high school. And I was making a lot of art back then. It was fantastic. I was sharing art with other students, being mentored, having a lot of really great relationships built, putting on happenings and events where people came together and shared experiences. And it made me feel like art was something exuberant that people could do together and sort of bring themselves fully into a connection with others. And that was really exciting to me. And this feeling was reinforced by stories that my high school art teacher told me about art movements and communities in the recent past, such as the Beats and the downtown scene and punks on the Lower East Side. And I wanted to find something like that and be part of it. I really had this sense that this would be, the right kind of life for me. And even though later I stopped identifying as an artist, in my 20s I did become part of a community that's not entirely unlike those of New York's recent history. That said, like those, this arts community is made up of lots of different kinds of folks, self-identified artists, performers, musicians, writers, organizers, and others with various relationships to art making and an art scene or an art market. But they're brought together by a shared kind of sense of a life that they want to live and a way of living. And they sort of agglomerate in certain parts of the city because of economic, cultural, and social factors that sort of produce residential, commercial, and industrial agglomerations. So I'm not just talking about artists, although most of the people that I work with are self-identified working artists, but I'm talking about kind of a cultural group that exists alongside other kind of stakeholder groups as well. So, all right. So, all of us, including me in this picture, were labeled with red arrows as hipsters in the New York Magazine in 2007. Except the people with gray hair, you'll see they don't have arrows. This story was actually about an eviction of over 200 people from their home. And the New York Magazine led the story with this tagline. So, we sort of take this as, or I would like to take this as just a sort of corrective, showing this photo to illustrate that, this framing of kind of quote unquote hipsterdom in some sense is used, and you all laughed, as a way to kind of situate a group of people as sort of defined or motivated by cultural capital or a sort of cool factor, which carries with it assumptions about transience, detachment, and nihilism, and kind of enables this discursive kind of framing of these communities of people as sort of it's not a problem that they're evicted from their home. In fact, we're going to just make a joke out of it, right? So, this is a deeply problematic sort of discourse, I think, when we're talking about arts communities and how they can become a sort of productive and connected and collaborative part of neighborhoods. So, you know, it is certainly true for some people in the communities that I work with that, that some people are transient and are nihilistic. That is certainly the case. But by and large, that has certainly not been my personal experience. And to borrow a reference and from a really amazing organizer who works with a lot of kids in the neighborhood named Stephen Half from Still Waters in a Storm, my personal experience, and I think the experience of a lot of the folks I work with, is less an experience of cool and more an experience of warmth and more an experience of connectedness and interaction and feeling like part of a group of people that you want to be in relation to and that you feel like, you know, affirmed and happy to be a part of. In 2006, I became part of organizing art events in Bushwick. And in 2007, I was one of the founders of Arts in Bushwick, which is an all-volunteer, non-hierarchical organization based in the Bushwick arts community. Today is the first day of our 6th Bushwick Open Studios Festival, and that this year we have over 540 shows in over 250 locations in a 3-square-mile area. And we don't actually track the number of individual participants in those shows, but it's well over 3,000. So, you know, there's a lot of people doing a lot of things and sort of coming together and presenting themselves collectively on this weekend with whatever they're doing. This show includes a lot of artists and a lot of folks who would not identify as artists, a lot of community organizations. Shows happen everywhere, people's homes, galleries, studios, local businesses, in public space, in schools and senior centers, all over the place. And this is an entirely uncurated event. Anyone who wants to participate can register themselves and be listed in the program. And the listings in the program are entirely non-hierarchical. There's no special status given to galleries or better known or more established artists. So, you know, there are a lot of criteria that operate in the sort of quote-unquote art world aren't really at play in the way that this event is set up. And it's, again, all run by volunteers. So, you know, individual participants have their own relationships to the art market, but the event as a whole is very sort of structured around sort of not promoting that as its primary goal. The goal is more about connecting and highlighting the work of local artists, connecting them with each other, letting them feel like they're part of something together, and helping them to promote themselves and their work. And artists and other organizations being part of something together. So what this is really about, to put on my little sociologist hat for 2 seconds, is it's really about social capital. That is the sort of bonds between people in a community that sort of are both beneficial in some material ways, as well as affirming and sort of good, hermeneutically, you know, beneficial to individuals because they feel like they're living a life where they're connected to others, right? So there's this sort of idea of social capital. And there's also, you know, this parallel idea of cultural capital, which is the kind of cool factor, or the aesthetics, the semiotics that go along with the arts in our society. And these are two very different kinds of resources, right? One is about sort of connecting, and one is more about hierarchy in a lot of cases, about sort of trading off, you know, against each other to get more status. So, you know, what this event tries to do is to bring those things together, to bring together sort of the capacity for people to show their work and potentially advance themselves and their livelihood while doing it in a way that's structurally and aesthetically oriented toward improving and promoting sort of social connection and a sense of community and solidarity. This is some of the organizers. This probably conforms to some of your pre-existing expectations of what the organizers of such a thing might look like. It's on a roof of a loft building in front of a lovely Manhattan skyline. And, you know, some of these folks are artists, some aren't. Some are lifelong neighborhood residents, some are recent arrivals. What they sort of have in common is that they have this drive and motivation to build, leverage, and participate in this community. And they, you know, aren't necessarily advancing their sort of individual cultural capital. In fact, a lot of the work they do is unsung. but they do sort of seem to get a lot out of it because we've been able to run the event this way for quite a while. So people do seem to get a lot out of doing it. So the image of people on the roof of a loft building, that's what you may have seen. However, that's only a tiny sliver of what's going on in the neighborhood. In fact, most of the neighborhood, for those of you who don't know or never really thought about it, has been for the past several decades and remains today a neighborhood inhabited mostly by long-term residents and new immigrants, many of whom are minority and relatively low income. I like so these folks that are the relatively low income, largely minority, long-term residents and immigrants, they have a ton of social capital. They have a ton of it. I mean, they have organizations, various institutions, social networks, really embedded sort of relationships with each other and in the neighborhood. And, frankly, they've contributed a lion's share of the work that has happened over the past several decades to make the neighborhood livable, vibrant, sustainable in certain ways, et cetera. Like I said, the vast majority of residents of the neighborhood have really nothing to do with the arts community or the art scene. But you wouldn't know that to look at any press about the neighborhood. Media representations of Bushwick focus disproportionately on the arts community and things associated with it. And even more specifically, often on a few high-profile spaces, such as a handful of art galleries that have relatively recently arrived in the neighborhood. I like to joke that maybe 2% of the population is getting 98% of the media attention. But at the same time, as it's a joke, it's really not funny. I mean, this erasure and invisibility creates a profound sense of discursive displacement. Like when a local leader who works with an organization that mostly is engaged with the Latino community told me about an experience he had seeing a video about his home, Williamsburg, and it was all kind of this art scene, newcomer artist images. This process really plays out not just in the media, but also on the street. And this building is a block from the park where the photo I showed you before was taken. Redevelopment and reinvestment can be helpful in disinvested areas, but by who and for who? Another example, art is used to promote certain condominiums in more explicit ways. This also goes for rental buildings. And so the value of art is not is rarely what people will pay for it. What people will pay for art. But what is its value? First, it may not be primarily what people pay for art objects or art experiences. A cynical view might be that the value of art is incorporated in real estate prices. An optimistic view might be that the value of art is incorporated in or is produced in social relationships and the sort of value that people take out of being engaged and involved in art communities. And for this to be an optimistic view, we have to see social capital as something that is not confined to an aesthetic group or a cultural group, but is something that we can connect with others who are not part of arts communities and advance all of our shared goals around sustainability. We need to behave as neighbors. We need to see each other as neighbors and push back on some of the problematic pioneer and frontier type narratives. And the arts community can act in its own interest while also working in the interest of others if we develop strategies in solidarity and relationship to others in the neighborhood. We are all renters. Mostly 85% of the neighborhood is renters. And that gives us a really shared platform to be concerned and seek for and look for solutions. So lastly, these are some things that we have done together, reaching out, building bridges, also raising awareness and discussing these issues within the arts community, going out, getting involved, listening to others, and shifting representation. And the last thing I'll say, hopefully this presentation helped me to shift representation somewhat and that you all were able to hear that. So thank you.